Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another amazing episode of The Lion's Den. I'm your host, Venezia Leone, and today I sat down with Mark Bischoff, CEO of Starnet, a member-owned cooperative that helps commercial flooring contractors across North America grow and scale their businesses. In our conversation, Mark shares how he got his start selling flooring while putting himself through college, and how that experience eventually led him into leadership roles spanning both large corporations and entrepreneur-driven organizations. We talk about what entrepreneurs can learn from large companies, why balancing structure and flexibility is so important when scaling a business, and how Starnet has built a unique model that allows independent business owners to collaborate without sacrificing their autonomy. We also dive into the future of construction, the growing shortage of skilled trade workers, how AI and automation may reshape the industry over the next decade, and why some of the biggest opportunities often come from outsiders willing to challenge the status quo. Mark brings a really unique perspective from an industry that most people don't think about every day, but one that quite literally makes every other business possible. It was a fascinating conversation, and I think you'll really enjoy hearing what he has to say. Hello, Mark. So excited to have you on the Lion's Den today.
It's great to be with you today. I appreciate you inviting me on your program.
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about an industry that most people don't think about, but literally every business depends on, which is construction and the built environment. And you've spent more than 30 years across both small businesses and massive public companies. What have you seen that most people completely misunderstand about the construction industry?
Well, the way we view the construction industry is we activate the possibility for all other businesses in the economy. So far, we haven't figured out how to work outdoors every day, and you can't do AI in the rain. So that's part of our foundational view of what we do and our contribution to society.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story. How did you end up in this industry? Yeah, walk me through it.
Well, it was pretty practical entry. I needed to earn money to pay for my college education. I took a part-time job at Sears. At that time, you could take an hourly role, or there were certain departments that were commission departments. I took the available role that I could earn commission so I could maximize the time I spent on the floor. And that was window treatments and floor covering. And the rest is history. That was my introduction. Sears actually had an excellent training program, and I was able to go in the back during working hours. At that time, it was VHS training tapes, and that was my launch in the floor covering industry. And I funded my college education that way. I was managing the sales for 2 store locations for Sears and managing the labor crews for one of the stores. So it was quite a bit of responsibility for a college person, but it was a fast activation, and I learned quite a bit in a short period of time.
Yeah, I definitely could not have balanced undergrad with leading multiple teams across different stores. So that's very impressive. So, and then what about your entrepreneurship journey? So, obviously at some point you decided, "Hey, I want to be more in charge than I am right now." What sort of sparked that decision, and how did you go about making that jump?
Well, I spent most of my career I've got the printer going off, and I apologize for that in the background if you can hear it. If not, then we'll just keep moving. I spent most of my career in the corporate environment, and because of that, I was exposed to lots of entrepreneurs and admired generally their fearlessness. You know, when you're working inside a larger organization that has layers of assurance and there are so many safety nets set up in large companies that occur over time. When you get perspective from an entrepreneur of how much they have to manage and juggle and become really good general managers as opposed to a line operator, a marketing person or a salesperson or running operations. An entrepreneur has a broad set of skills, and it's really an ideal situation for an ambitious person to broaden their skills and get exposure across the economy in different ways. And you make a lot of mistakes as a entrepreneur, and hopefully you don't make too many that are catastrophic, but those errors that you make are much better learning experiences than you making errors in a corporate environment, because of the safety net that's around you and the risk management that already is in place in larger companies. So I always admired the fearlessness and the boldness of an entrepreneur, and those were many of our customers as I worked through my career.
Yeah. So one of the things that's interesting is you have this large corporate exposure and the experience of running, a smaller business, growing it, et cetera. What did that dichotomy sort of teach you about scaling, like scale versus agility? Because I feel like you've probably been frustrated in both ways of, oh, I wish we could make this change faster, but also, can we slow this train down? So what have you sort of learned about balancing the two of those?
Well, I think early on in my career, having the safety net of a corporation was helpful. Although you were doing your own deals as a commissioned salesperson, it was in-home sales, and you had to deal with the customer around a very sensitive topic, their home. And so the intensity around that communication and the interaction was very high because it was very personal to that customer. It wasn't like selling a shirt or a pair of shoes. You were in their home making a long-term change to that home that their friends and family would judge them around.
Yeah.
And this is a high stakes situation for those clients, especially if they have a graduation party or something like that coming. That's it ups the ante a bit.
Yep.
So having the corporate structure around me, and then having the flexibility to work through that situation with that business to consumer client, that was a rapid learning curve, because you understood that there needed to be rules and boundaries, but you had to have the flexibility. Today, in our membership at Starnet, they have similar situation. They're looking for the structure and framework that a larger organization like a Starnet can provide them, but they have to be flexible and attentive to the clients in their market. Now, it's not a B2C operation. It's B2B on a grand scale, because they're doing most of the largest work in the country, airports, schools, things that will be there generations after they exit those projects, or in some cases, they may do that same project in those same buildings multiple times in their career. So it's quite a commitment on their end to be able to be flexible and manage those clients, because they'll change over time. People retire, and new owners come into those buildings, new tenants come into those buildings. But the business is, if it's being run well, we're hoping that our member companies are generational. So this framework that Starnet provides gives them a safety blanket that, as an entrepreneur, as an individual, they would have to make a lot of errors to come across that same sort of framework.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, of providing them that framework and that safety net, while still allowing them to personalize their experience, whether that's, the type of projects or the, area they're working in or something like that, right? Because I think sometimes when you make things too global, you lose some of that personalization and that like localization. So one of the things I want to hear about, you mentioned Starnet. Would love to just hear a little bit about what it is, because I think it's sort of a uniquely structured company. And yeah, why you structured it that way, and did it start out the same thing that you thought it was going to be, when you first sort of had the idea for it versus now?
So the organization originally was a group of commercial flooring contractors that had become friends. This is in the 1980s that had become friends in the business and had met each other either through common suppliers or at regional and national trade shows. They became friendly enough that they would meet once in a while, and they would share, because they weren't competing in the same market. They would share trade secrets that were not applicable, meaning Seattle, a member could tell a person in Atlanta their trade secrets, and in their lives they would not cross over, because business at that point was very local. And it was uncommon for a member to have more than one location or even cross state lines. So that's how it started. In 92, it was formalized into a marketing cooperative. So it's a member-owned organization that is a very focused mastermind club. So some people are familiar with groups like Vistage and subscribe to that. That's a general mastermind group. Our group, Starnet, is a very focused in the commercial interior, commercial flooring contractor mastermind group. So members are particular about who they let in. So generally, they're already significant in the market. They have scale and a reputation and a client list and project list that generally is impressive. And most of our members have been in their markets more than 25 years. So they often are generational companies, family companies. Recently, we have some big developments in our group. They're operating in multiple locations across state lines. That's somewhat new, maybe in the last decade. In addition, they're offering services and products outside of floor covering, such as systems, office furniture, epoxy and resinous coatings, electrostatic dissipative flooring for manufacturing and data centers. So these are all expansions to their original flooring focus. They're becoming much more specialty trade contractors. So this is that scaling. You can scale regionally, you can scale through the products and services that you offer, and then you can just scale in size as far as your capacity to do work. And our members are doing all of the above. So today, the members guide Starnet as to the things that we should be focusing on. There's a small staff that operates Starnet on behalf of the members. We have a board of directors we report to, and the funding for the organization comes from the purchases in network of supporting manufacturers. So not every manufacturer is a part of Starnet. We have a short list of manufacturers that support us, and if our members grow their business with those manufacturers, they pay a dividend back to the membership, and then we pay that out to the members minus the overhead costs, which includes me, one time each year. And the members love getting that dividend check in May of every year.
I really like that financial model, because everyone is incentivized to do good work, because everybody benefits the more business and the more, the more materials that are manufactured and the more flooring projects that are completed. Is that sort of your, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it is. And in 92, it was pretty progressive, meaning the structure of a marketing co-op as opposed to a purchasing co-op. So there are a lot more purchasing co-ops than marketing co-ops. And we don't get involved in setting pricing at all at Starnet. All we do is collect the vendors that want to do business with our members and grow. And all of the pricing and programs are negotiated locally between that member and their field salespeople. So it has that flexible local focus, but we have the national footprint. So a vendor could come to us and say, we're launching a new product. We need your help. We expect that it's going to reach these segments. Which one of your members do that kind of work? And can they help us get this launched so that we have boardroom numbers in 1 year rather than 4 years? And our job is to accelerate that success for that vendor. So those are the kind of partnerships that Starnet gets involved in. And then we help the members deploy to reach those goals. And if we reach the goals, then there's a dividend. And there are loyalty marketing programs everywhere around us. I mean, the grocery store, the gas you buy, your airline miles. In 1992, that was not common at all. And so it was a pretty progressive idea in 92 when the members set this up.
Yeah. And it's still successful today, which goes to show if people have a reason to buy in, like everybody benefits from that. I think co-ops are a great structured for business. Okay, so I want to dive into the industry a little bit. So obviously construction, flooring specifically, is essential, massive. Like you said, we got to be indoors. We can't always be outdoors. So why do you think that it is kind of slow when it comes to adopting technology, given that it is, all at the forefront for so long and has been around forever?
Our business is a strange part of the construction industry because we are a fashion industry. We're one of the few parts of construction that human beings actually touch every day. They're not necessarily touching Ethernet cables or HVAC chases or any of that. So if your clients are physically touching product, it tends to be much more intimate. So that's a unique fashion part of our business. But we also have the regulatory framework that we have to work under in construction. So construction specifications and the scheduling, all of those are legal documents that can put you sideways if you don't meet those requirements. So it's a very difficult business in that a lot of it is subjective, and you have to please the client that has opinions about things and how they feel about your product. But then you have this regulatory framework that's very objective and can be punitive if you don't follow the documents properly. So it's a very difficult business.
Yeah. So you find that the sort of challenge doesn't actually come from the frontline workers or the middle management or anything like that. It's actually more of the end user's preferences and staying up to code and following all of the laws.
Yeah, so they may have an opinion about how something is looking or how they want it to be in their building, but it may run contrary to ADA, or it may be a risk issue for your occupancy permit if it's not finished properly. So that local authority at some point it has a impact on that subjective view of, I think this looks nice. So an example is we have all these wonderful floors that mimic wood, the appearance of wood. And the end user might say, I love that look, put it up the wall. I want a feature wall behind my reception desk. But that product that they like the look of does not meet smoke and flame. So it's a regulatory risk, and they get disappointed like, this is my building. Why can't you just stick it to the wall? I think it'll look great. And our members can't do that because there's a massive legal risk of improperly installing that product. It has to meet a regulatory hurdle that our member can't just ignore. So that's just one small example of the challenges they run into every day.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me, like, does the regulation sort of change? Like, for example, if something isn't up to, smoke and what did you call it? Smoke and fire?
Yeah, smoke and flame testing. Yeah.
Smoke and flame testing. Why would it even be an offered like material? Because is it because like those regulations change depending on the type of building and the location and stuff like that?
Well, it's the type of building, but also where it is in the space and whether it's floor or wall, the application. So floor covering products that are designed for flooring installation, they're only tested for flooring requirements.
Yeah.
Slip resistance, wear, smoke and flame. And those testing procedures assume that it's in place on the floor, not on the wall. The wall testing is totally different. It's like if you have a building code for hurricane zones and non-hurricane zones, it's similar. The same product may be allowed in Ohio or somewhere in the Midwest, but in Florida, it would not be allowed. It's against the regulations.
So how do you and maybe the leadership team at Starnet, how do you balance all the different like all your different members' needs and experiences across all these different industries? Like, do you have sort of leadership ideas that you stand by, or do you have any like, oh, I had to learn this because of like what my job sort of relies on me for?
Well, it's our industry is led by veteran people who have made lots of mistakes. Even on our staff, we have a couple hundred years of experience, and still feel young, but I have a few decades of mistakes behind me. But so there's part of that is that we have very specific industry knowledge, and we have a lot of people that have made a lot of mistakes that are are trying to help prevent that for others. And the other thing we do is we try to sum things up and organize them in ways that all of our members, Canada, the United States, East Coast, West Coast, they can adapt them. So when I was a kid, there was this book series called Choose Your Own Adventure. So part of what we do is we put the book together, and then
Mm.
at each path where a member needs to make a decision about what's best for their customer or best for their business, they could choose their own adventure. But our job is to be deep enough that we provide them enough support that when they take that path, they have confidence that Starnet is there to back them. Now, we may be only there 80%, we might be there 95% in some instances, but that's very different from a member having to figure all that out on their own. And in addition, for specific projects, or if a member is generous enough, and I call it generous because they're opening themselves up to others. If they raise their hand and say, "This is what I'm trying to accomplish. I need help from Starnet. Can you suggest a vendor? Can you suggest a member that's not in my market that might be able to assist me in this particular project?" And I'm always shocked at the enthusiasm the vendors and our members show when a member formally asks for help on a project. It's really astonishing how they deploy to support that member. So, and we're the conduit for that.
Yeah. I really like that approach of giving them the tools they need, but not necessarily being so prescriptive that they don't actually get to own those decisions in the end. So one of the things that I would love your take on as somebody who's been in this industry for a while is there's this, shortage, or at least what appears to me, of the skilled trades. And there seems to be a lot of conversation around, are we going to have enough people who have these skills to continue to support our society in our needs of, skilled workers? Do you have any thoughts on that? And do you have any sort of like predictions, or is there anything that worries you about it? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, this is a major issue, so I'm going to riff on this a little bit because
Perfect.
this is we spent a lot of time on this, and I personally have spent a lot of time on it. So there's good and bad to everything. So with the existing regulatory framework, so the slowness of the industry in making change, we believe that this is going to be a problem much longer than it should be, because to get codes changed, to get the capital investment set up to make a change to adapt to this scarcity of blue collar, and I'll call it craft labor, it's going to take much longer than it should because of regulation. And anytime you get tradition and regulation bundled up in one, and construction industries like the poster child, the slowness and the lack of innovation is really detrimental to making these kinds of changes. So our industry is a capital intensive industry, heavy manufacturing, and in addition, the methods to get those products put into place in a usable form are tedious and highly manual. So a couple of examples: we're still spreading glue across acres of concrete, which is the only way to get many of these products to perform, because they have to be able to to be compatible with office furniture and wheeled office chairs and the delivery of soda to the vending machine in the hallway. Unless you're gluing things full contact to the floor, you have other issues of performance. So there's not an issue where people are deliberately choosing not to solve this problem. But if someone said, well, you can't use that product you've been making since 1955 on the same machines using similar chemistry because the soda pop delivery person can't roll their dolly over it. This new design is failing in practical application in a building. So you're not going to build a whole plant to create a new product if some of these things aren't covered off. So I'm not sure if I explained that well enough, but basically what happens in life is something that the flooring performance of today supports to a reasonable extent. But if we were to say, okay, we have to stop doing full spread adhesive, we need to be able to recover these materials at end of life and recycle them completely. Those requirements have not been in place in our industry for 50, 60 years. Therefore, the capital is not in place, the manufacturing is not in place, the processes aren't in place. And if they make a change, other manufacturers also have to make a change. The person who makes the dolly that the soda pop goes on that gets delivered has to change the wheels. Well, how do you get that done? Because that's the same issue. You have a company who's probably been making wheels for those dollies for 50 years on the same equipment, and they're not going to make a change unless they have to or they're forced to.
Yeah.
So those are some of the issues that we're dealing with in on site. So now we have a whole labor force that's trained on products that don't change that often, that are highly manual. It used to be that labor was free and plentiful, meaning you could get lots of people on a job site for basically zero cost, apprentices and students, etc. And products were somewhat rare and expensive. Today, it's completely flipped. You could get beautiful products at every price point from everywhere in the world, and the labor to put those products in is scarce and rare. And
Wow.
if it's an old style of installation like full spread adhesive, where you have to sew seams or where you have to weld seams, that's a specific craft that very few people are, ambitious coming out of college or going into the workforce to learn. So, and this is not an isolated problem, the floor covering, it's welding and machinists, and every trade is having this problem. So now the issue is we're competing with the government for that labor. So the government is across the board going back into infrastructure, which requires these blue collar workers to build submarines, battleships, electrical infrastructure, power generation, uh, uh, roads, bridges, dams. The funding that has been let loose by the government is positive in that it's going to get all of that work done in a shorter period of time than private investment. However, they distort the economy, meaning if you're going to pay a millwright or a welder to build submarines, that is going to be a high salary job. And if you're a floor covering installer and you're ambitious, you might say, I have hand skills. I'm going to learn to weld. I'm going to go work in the shipyard because I can make $50, $60, $100,000 more in that role because of the artificial demand that the government is putting into the blue collar marketplace. So
Yeah.
there are no optimum outcomes. Everything is always a balance to what the reward and what the downside risk is. And although, many of these projects, they're needed by society and needed by our country, it's going to distort the labor environment. And the labor, blue collar labor is scarce right now. So the costs are going to go up. So in that backdrop, we are recommending to our members, drive down your white collar costs, not the workforce, not the bodies, the efficiency of those workers has to dramatically increase, probably 10x.
Wow.
So what you used to do in Excel and with a legal pad, that is not going to get you 10x. So we're asking our members to invest in technology to increase the productivity and the output of their white collar workforce. Try to drive the costs as low as possible with your current workforce. And understand that you're going to have to over deploy, overspend in the field until the robots are ready. And then it's going to flip again. And because the products don't change that quickly, there are going to have to be companies that enter our business from outside the business. Our existing flooring manufacturers are unlikely to make this change. Companies are going to have to develop products that are designed to be made in robot factories by robots, taken to the job site probably by a driverless truck, put into the job site and assembled probably by robots. Our beautiful Dalton carpet manufacturers are probably not going to be the ones that develop that system. It's probably going to be an outsider who views the marketplace differently that's going to do it. And this happens in every industry. You used to have to go to the butcher, the baker, the vegetable stand. Now you just go to Publix or Kroger or
or you have it delivered.
Or you have it delivered. So the models are always being broken and reformed, and often they're not done by the incumbents because they just don't see it. That's that innovator's dilemma. Business is good, our margins are good, we've been growing, we have X number of locations. You're telling me that we've got to retool for a robot labor force? No, we're not going to do that. And pretty soon someone does it and that business is retired.
My favorite innovator's dilemma, it's so off topic, but my favorite innovator's dilemma story is how Netflix was like a movie sending movies, and they saw the industry and they said, okay, we're going to totally digitize everything, change everything we're doing. And Blockbuster was the one who suffered that innovator's dilemma of, no, we've got the market. I think that story is so interesting. So to wrap it all up, I know. Go ahead.
Before you leave that, I have a connection to the flooring industry around Blockbuster.
Yeah.
If you're interested.
Yeah, of course.
So Blockbuster was building store locations like crazy. And there was a manufacturer that had the spec for the flooring in Blockbuster. What happened was this, in the past, the network or the number of reliable locations of contractors to put that floor in over the scale of Blockbuster didn't exist. There was no one that could service that coast to coast. So the manufacturer was making the widgets in one factory, sending it to thousands of locations, but the labor force wasn't organized to deploy into all of those locations. So Blockbuster said, manufacturer, if you don't get this problem solved for us, you're going to lose this spec. So they went direct. They hired a labor force instead of going through the channel. They hired a labor force and developed an entire system to support that one account based on their size and scale. And they alienated a lot of the contractors that were professional, that showed up on time, that made sure the store openings were on time and everything was done properly. But those responsible contractors had a limited service footprint. They could not service Blockbuster across the country. So that was one of the early go-gets for the Starnet members, is how can we organize our members so that we can support a massive retailer expansion like this. Now today we can deploy, but when Blockbuster was growing like that, the big gap was labor, and that manufacturer had to make a choice, and they alienated their existing customer base to save that account. That's how that happened.
Wow. And I hope they enjoyed a little bit of prosperity before that account went under. Hopefully.
Just
Well,
a little bit.
well, Mark, it's been so great to learn from you as your journey as a leader and as someone, in the commercial construction industry. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great to be with you.